So I was sitting here thinking about creative finance deals and how I have never done one before. Now, I have been wholesaling and bird dogging real estate for about 9 years. I've been doing it part time, but out of had to be hundreds of deals that I have looked at and been in negotiations in. After over 100 deals, well, 100 negotiations. After that many negotiations and just talking to people about selling their houses or buying their houses or whatever, finding sellers who want to sell, whether they want to sell high or low. I've talked to, it has to be over 100. Oh, it has to be over 100. I have spoken to over 100 sellers about their houses, and I have yet to do a creative finance deal, like an owner finance deal or a subject to. I have never done any of that, and I have presented it to plenty of sellers, potential sellers. I've presented creative finance deals to a bunch of sellers, but whenever I talk to them about it, they get confused and they're like, it's just too much. What is it again? Why you just can't buy it? Why I just can't get my cash? That's kind of that's the common thing with sellers that I have ran into. They just want their cash. They don't want to do any complicated, I'm the bank and I'm lending you the money, if you're the seller. They don't want to lend you the money. I mean, you can explain it. I have explained these deals to some sellers really simply. Um, they just, it's just too complicated. It's so simple that it's just too complicated. That's what I say. It's just too simple and it's too complicated. So therefore, it's too complicated for some people, for most people, rather. One person, I think, out of over 100 negotiations that I have been in, two people knew about owner financing or creative real estate, creative financing. Only two people knew about it. One lady recently, I was in negotiations with this person a few years ago. She needed to move to Oklahoma, and she needed to move quickly. And I asked her if she wanted to do like a creative finance thing, where I can just borrow the money from her. Just borrow. Well, when I say borrow, she's carrying a note, and she's just receiving payments from me. I asked her if she wanted to do that. And she was open to it because she knew some people in real estate before. I think she knew some realtors. Some of her friends are realtors. And I think she said she was in real estate, to some effect. I'm not sure, how she was in real estate, but she told me that she was in real estate. And before she started her current career, whatever she was doing. So she said she knew about owner financing and she was open to it, but the numbers just wouldn't work for us. She wanted too much, so owner financing wouldn't have worked for me. It probably would have worked for her. She didn't mind either way. She just wanted to leave quickly. So, owner financing would have worked for her, but it was just the numbers weren't right for me. She wanted too much. She wanted a retail price. I tried to make it work, but it didn't work. But she was one person that knew about owner financing and was open to it. And she was one of the sellers that like really listened to the deal I proposed to her. Um, I can't remember the exact numbers on her deal. But I think she wanted, if you take a look at my screen here, I think she wanted, um, so she was selling her house for, um, what did she want for a house? I think she wanted like 275K for her house. Either that or I think it was 85K. I think it was 285K. She wanted 285K for her house. So that's what she wanted. The house was, let's see, what was the house? The house was probably like 1,300 square feet. So the house was like 1,300 square feet. It was built in like 2013 year built. I think it was built in like 2013. It was a 3 bed, 2 bath. It was a nice house. It was a nice house. It's an okay house. The only problem was just the weird painting she had. She had like the paint. She painted her own kitchen, so, and she used this freaking bad looking green color. It was just the stupidest thing I've seen. She got in there. She's one of these DIYers, so she got in there and she wanted to renovate her house herself, and the house looked bad. The house looked bad. It looked bad. So she painted the kitchen like this green color, and it was crazy. So, you would need to go in there and repaint the kitchen. And I think that was like the only thing. Oh yeah, her mud room, well, her laundry room was like a crazy blue color, this light blue color, and so you would need to paint that to make it match the rest of the house. And she was kind of an older lady. I think she was in her early 50s. So she, I guess back when she was young, that was kind of the thing. Painting different rooms, different colors. I mean, the only way that would really work is if you got some kind of like design experience, to make the colors pop. And some colors change your mood when you walk into a room and it's a certain color. It changes your mood. Some colors make rooms look bigger, and you have to really have some design experience to know how to make different colors in different rooms work in the house. You just can't be like, oh, I love this color, this is my favorite color, and you just put it in a room. And then it's, I guess you're not really thinking about selling it when you're in there trying to make your house a home. You're not really thinking about selling it, but that's something that you have to think about, because you never know when you have to sell. There's plenty of things that I want to do to my home, but I always think about me selling it one day, because there's no guarantee that I'm gonna stay here forever. And you got to think about later on down the line, like if you do something to your house, do you have to revert it back to the way it was, so you can make it more marketable to sell, or leave whatever customization that you did in the house, you leave it like that and just hope someone likes that customization as much as you do. So you have to think about that. But maybe these people weren't thinking about leaving. Actually, they were not thinking about leaving. I think she kind of got laid off of her job, or oh no, you know what? I think her husband got a job in Oklahoma, and because he got laid off of his job, and the only place close by that he could go to work and do his same job that he's skilled in was in Oklahoma. So she had to find a job in Oklahoma, and she found one, and they needed to move in like 15 days or something like that. So she was about to put her house on the market, and she received a letter from me. And if you want to learn how to do direct mail, because I use direct mail as my marketing, for my marketing, and if you want to learn how I do it, look in the description. It'll be the best money that you ever spend, learning how I market to motivated sellers, potential motivated sellers. But she received a letter from me, and she called me, and she said that, I think it was like a Saturday, and she was like, hey, I'm selling my house on Monday. Well, she said, I'm listing my house on Monday with a realtor, with a real estate agent, realtor. She said, so, if we can strike a deal before Monday, then that'd be great. That'd be great for both of us. So she was just basically saying that I'm going to give you a shot, until Monday. What can you offer me? And so I asked her. I said, what do you want for the property? And she said that she wanted 285. Now, after I spoke with her and got all this information, the square footage and everything, the address and all that, after I got all that information and her price, I told her I was going to call her back, and I looked at the area to see what her house may be worth, and I found that in her neighborhood, houses were selling for around 300,000. So this is what houses were selling for in her area, 300,000. So she's like right there, she's right there. There's hardly any room. And it's too close to try to like go through and look at every comparable. It's too close. The spread is it's just too close. Maybe it was lower than the price that the comparables were selling for, that have sold for, actually. So I saw, as far as the comparable goes, I saw about 3 or 4 properties that sold that looked just like hers. They were around 1,300 square feet. Man, I found some great comparables in this neighborhood, actually. So $300,000 was like a great. That's what her house would have been worth. Now, because her house had the painting issues, because these other houses that sold for 300,000, they were in A to B condition. A to B condition. I mean, some of them were, really, really good looking. And then, the other ones, they look good. They were like B condition. So they look good. Her house, though, she thought that her house was in A to B condition. But I would say that her house was in like a C condition. Her house wasn't that great. Like I said, she had the painting issues. Different rooms had different colors in them, and they didn't have any type of, they didn't go together. There wasn't any thought put into them, other than those colors in those certain rooms being her favorite colors, and she just put them in certain rooms. She painted certain rooms a bunch of her favorite colors, and so her house, that needed to be fixed. And then the house itself was in, the house itself was in okay condition. It's just that, outside of the house was okay. She had some mildew on the side of the house, and, her house just needed to be cleaned up. And it was just really a cosmetic turnaround with her house, just cosmetic stuff that needed to be done with her house. It looked, the reason why I can't really get it out of how it looked, because it looked old. It looked dated. It just didn't look like these other houses looked. It didn't look like what it should look like if it were to sell for this much. But she, some sellers, they say, oh yeah, the house down the street sold for 300,000, so mine will sell for mine has to sell for 285 or something like that. That's what they think. They just look at Zillow, and I'm going through negotiations right now with the house I just got in. These people that I'm negotiating this new house I just got, they're doing the same thing. They're looking on Zillow and Realtor.com and seeing what they have as the worth of their house. But really, that zestimate, or that number, that estimate of your home value that Realtor.com gives you, it's just showing what's the average home selling price in your area. So houses could be selling for, what Zillow says that your house is worth, But you have to check their condition. They may be in great condition, really good condition. So is it fair for you to sell your house at a price that other houses are selling for in great looking condition, in great condition? Like, do you think you can sell your house if your house is in, its original condition? If you did minor updates to it since you've owned it, and then you got these other houses that are selling for whatever price they're selling for, but they are beautiful because people, flippers or whatever, or people who have owned them, homeowners who have lived in the house, made regular updates to it, so it looks really good. You think you can sell your house for what these people are selling their house for? If their houses are looking really, really nice and yours is looking, average. So sellers just look at Zillow and Realtor.com, and they're like, oh, okay, so my house will sell for that. It may not sell for that. Your house may be worth less than that. That's the average of what these other houses in your area are selling for. And sometimes the bed and bath counts are mixed, and they're not, correct all the time when Zillow and Realtor.com are giving you these estimates. They're mixing the bed and bath counts a lot of times, and sometimes the bed and bath counts aren't as accurate as they should be. I like Realtor.com because Realtor.com, they have, and Zillow as well. They have what's on the MLS, and see what's on the MLS is really accurate information. Realtor.com, they, from my experience, Realtor.com, I will trust Realtor.com's bed and bath count over Zillow's. So so this lady here, she thought that she could sell her house for 285. Now, so I was looking at that. I was like, man, when I looked at the other what the other houses are selling for, I was like, man, she wants too much. There's nothing we can do here. And I think what did I do? I did something. What year was this in? Oh man, I can't even remember the year. Let me get my loan calculator out here, because I did something with interest. So I think when I was looking at this house, interest rates were they were at their highest. They were like 7%. Yeah, they was like 7%. So this is what the interest rates were at the time. Interest rates were 7%. And I think I worked out a deal to where I was paying her like 3% interest. I was paying her like 3% interest. And I just did like a traditional, it was traditional. I said the only thing that was different was I was going to pay her 3% interest. And so I was going to give her the 285. So I was going to give her the 285. Or was it two? Man, I'm sorry. I can't really. I wasn't expecting to tell you guys, this deal, because I can't really remember it that well. I think I offered her a little bit under this. It was like 275 or something like that, and it was at 3% interest. And like I said, it was a traditional deal. It was like the mortgage on this would be 30 years at 3% interest, and then the down payment. I think for the down payment, I was going to give her like a 10% down payment. So a 10% down payment. This is what I was going to give her. Let me see how that checks out on my calculator. So 275. Okay, and then interest rate of 3%. Okay, 30 years. So that was going to give me, it was around 1,100 dollar monthly payment to her, to the seller. And this house was going to be able, because I was going to use $10,000. That's why I wanted it down $10,000, because I was like, I need a little bit of room to paint those rooms over. I was just going to paint them, an ordinary color, beige or something like that. I was going to paint it. So I asked for a $10,000 deduction from her price, so I can use that to pay for painting and whatever else. The house would rent for, I think it was like, man, it was pretty good. It was 1,600, or some of those houses in that neighborhood were renting for like $1,700 a month. So her house, after I, repainted it and got it in, okay condition, like B condition, it probably would have rented for like $1,600 per month. And then that would have gave me, a $500, right? Yeah, six. Yeah. Yeah. So, that would have given me a $500 profit here. Um, and, that's now looking back, that was really tight. $500 was really tight. But I think at the time I was thinking, I was like, I'm just going to get a renter in there, and I'm going to sell it, because the this area that this house was in, it was appreciating pretty well. It was an area where there were a lot of factory jobs in this area. So there were a lot of factories nearby, some nationwide type of companies that had factories in this area. So it was, we're talking middle income people here. So I was thinking about just letting this just grow on its own, so get a renter in there, fix it up a little bit, the paint and whatever, put a renter in there, and just let this rent go to a bank account, hire a property manager, and just, forget about it, and just let this thing grow, and whatever the house needed as far as repairs or any type of expenses, let the property management company deal with it. Just give them the fund. They have access, give them access to pull the money out, and just let this money, this $500 profit here, just let this money flow into an account that the property management company can get access to. Or, they can contact me, or however they do it. I've never hired a property management company before. And funny enough, a lot of the cash buyers I deal with, they don't have property management companies neither. I mean, they just, I don't understand, they're kind of old school, I guess. They want to do all the management themselves, and I'm like, one of the guys I deal with, he has, I talk about him all the time. He has like 30 properties, and he likes to do the management himself. So, I really don't have a lot of experience in property management, but I do look them up, and look up different property management companies around town, and I look on their websites, and I see what they offer, and it looks like, I looked at one property management company not too long ago, and it looks like they kind of like, they do everything for you. They have all the contractors that you would need to do anything, fix anything in the house. They have access to all that, and then they're dropping the money off into your account. And, I would think that they would have access to, take money out, but maybe not. Maybe that, maybe, I mean, they probably would need to get your okay first, and of course, alert you to what's going on, I guess. But I was, for this deal, I was just gonna let it sit and then, collect money off the appreciation. You know what I'm saying? I was going to sell it at at some point in the near future. And I was just going to just, let the profit go into its own account just for this house and just let it grow on its own, just let it grow. But I presented this deal to the seller, and she didn't want to do it. She did not want to do it. I think she got confused at some point, I think she got confused at some point, and she was like, okay, so how does it work actually? and, it works like, I believe, since I've never done one yet, someone at a closing office, this closing company that I used to work with really well. And the only reason why I don't work with them anymore, it's not because they do bad business or anything like that. It's just because in that area, I was in the area where this closing office is. I was doing a lot of deals in that area, and one of the guys that bought one of my wholesale deals, he used this title company. I called it a closing company, title company. He used this title company, and and when we went to closing, I really liked the people at this title company. I really liked them. You could, I just liked them. I liked them so much. And then I got in contact. So I got the phone number of the person who did the closing for that one deal I did. And I did three more there, so I was the one telling the buyer and the seller, look, we're going to use this title company. So, this was like my favorite little title company. And I told him, I said, I already know where we're going to do closing. It's a great place, great people. So I'm going to arrange it. So we was using that one. I used that title company like three times. So four times total, but then after that first time, I used it three more times. But the person that I was working with there was telling me that, because I asked her how a creative deal would work, and she said, you would just pay these people, you just, she was saying set up an escrow account and pay them like that. But I guess that would work. I'm not sure how that would work, because sadly I have never done one yet, and nor has any of my other cash buyers have done one. I have not been able to get any facts on how the payments go to the seller. But I told this seller, I was like, the title company will handle all the payments and everything. So I told her not to worry, because that kind of is true. If it's not, the title company would definitely be your point of contact when trying to figure out how to get these people paid in these creative finance situations. We was gonna go to the title company, and whatever they say do, we was going to do it. So if whether it's escrow or me putting the money right into this seller's bank account, whatever they suggest, we were going to do. We was going to figure it out. So it's nothing to, it's nothing to be worried about or be confused about. They're going to give you some direction. But she didn't want to do this. She didn't want to. Maybe she didn't want to take less than 285. Because I offered her 275, and she didn't take. I thought she was going to take it. I was like, oh, it's 10 grand. But she did tell me that she had some things that she needed to pay for or whatever. And, so it didn't work out. So this was one deal that a seller was kind of interested in. The other creative financing deal was, so I found a house for $50K one time. And, I had this house on a contract. I was planning on wholesaling this house. So I had this house on a contract for like 2 months. So it was like 2 months. I had the house at $50K. The house was probably worth about 100 something thousand. So I thought I had a great deal here. But I think it was just the house. I think it was the neighborhood, really, to be honest. It was kind of a low income area. So I think it was just the area, the neighborhood that this house was in. It was in the okay part of this neighborhood, but the neighborhood overall was not, you know, it wasn't great. But I felt pretty safe there. I felt pretty safe in the area where this house was. But this house was like 1,500 square feet. Um, it was I think it was built in like the 1970s. So it was an okay built house. It was a nice house, and I had it for 50. And I kind of mentioned this story in another video I did. I wholesaled this house to a guy, and when we got the close, it's in another video. But in that video, I spoke about how this cash buyer who I wholesaled this house to wouldn't pay the seller $800 that she needed to pay for her closing costs. She said she wouldn't sell the house because I told her that we would pay for her closing costs. And when we got to the end of the deal, I forgot about it. I forgot that I told her that. And she wouldn't sign the documents at closing because she said that, well, Kelvin said that he was going to, you guys, she was talking to the cash buyer because I had left. I had got my $5,000 check and I left. And she was talking to the closing person, and then she was talking to the cash buyer who was still there. She said that Kelvin told me that you guys were going to pay for my closing costs. It says here that I owe $800 in closing costs. So who's going to pay for that? And and the cash buyer was like, "Oh, I'm not going to pay for it." He was just a petty person. I quit working with that guy, but I went back to the title company and gave her $800 out of my 5,000. But this was the same deal. This was the same seller. This was her house. So I got her house on a contract for 50,000, but I had her house under contract for about 2 months, and I was going to mention that the work on this house was minuscule, really, for this area. You didn't need to, for this to be a proper flip, you didn't need to do everything. It was kind of like a light flip, and then inside the house, it wasn't too bad. It was just really, you just really needed to do some cosmetic work, repaint the cabinets, and, do some repainting of the walls and all that. It wasn't in bad shape at all. It was built in 1970s. So, it wasn't in bad shape. So it was a light flip. So, the cash buyer that bought this house from me, I think, he had some people working for him. I think he paid these people a couple $1,000 and they got it to okay condition, and he has it rented right now. But I had this house on a contract for 2 months. I couldn't find a buyer anywhere to buy this house. So the seller suggested, now this was the first time this has ever happened. The seller suggested that we do owner financing. So I was like, okay, what do you suggest? And she was like, okay, you can just pay me, you can buy it for 50, and just pay me. So I'll hold the note. So she would, accept a IOU of 50K from me. And then in the meantime, I will pay principal and interest on this. So P&I. So I will pay principal and interest on this 50K of, I think it was like, she suggested like $300, $400. I think it was like $400 to now looking back. I'm like, man, she probably was trying to rip me off. I think she said $400 a month for, what did she say? Did she tell me 10 years? Let's see what that would be. No. What would that be? Okay. Yeah, she said 10 years. I think she said $400 a month for 120 months, I believe she said. Yeah, I think that's what her deal was. She said you can pay me $400, and you know what? I'm looking at my calculator here now, and yeah, that looks like a 3% interest rate. Yeah, well, actually, lower than that. Wow, it was lower than that for 10 years. Wow, it was like a 1% interest rate. She probably didn't even know what she was giving. She probably didn't even know what she was giving to me. Um, but I was paying her some interest. I was paying her some interest though. She was getting some interest. I would have ended up paying her $52,000. 52,000. I mean, we can get a little bit more detailed if we want. 52,562.40. So this is what I would have paid her at the end of this 120 months. Um, she wasn't really, no, she wasn't a great math person. She was an older lady, probably in her, mid 70s. And I think she just wanted to get around what she was getting in rent for this house. I think she was renting this house out for like $500 or something like that per month for like the last 20 years. She was one of those landlords who never changed their rent, you know. She never upped the rent since she's owned it. So she was getting $500 a month from this, from renters, different renters coming in there over the years. So she wanted to get around this. So she didn't really care about the interest. I was paying her nothing in interest. This in interest. See, she suggested this, but at the time, I didn't want to buy it. I didn't want to buy it because of the area. I didn't think it was a good area to invest in at the time. Sometimes some of these years, sometimes in real estate, investing in my career of investing in real estate, sometimes during certain months or certain years, I have this certain type of thinking, so I change up my principles sometimes. But over the long run, I have the same philosophy and same principles that I always follow. But sometimes I change them up. If I learn a new piece of information about something, I may change. I'm like, during this time, for instance, I was really big on not buying in bad areas because I had read some book about real estate investing, and in that book it was saying that you shouldn't buy in D and C areas. You shouldn't buy there. Beware of investing in those areas because the rent is high, but your maintenance will be crazy high because you're renting to low income people. These books always talk about that, how you shouldn't rent to low income people. But there's landlords out here making millions of dollars off of low income people, rent to low income people. So you can't, you have to take everything that you learn about and just, take it in and find out what's BS and what's not. And then you figure out what's not BS. And then you try to figure out how to incorporate that into your own investing design. However you want to invest, you incorporate what you learn from different people, and you make up your own mind about how you want to approach it. So I think at this time I was like, I'm not. I was like, see, look, I kind of missed out on this right here, because this house was 1,500 square feet. I probably could have rented this thing out for close to that. This area, this area was, I don't know, this area's kind of wasn't that good, but maybe I could have rented it for like $1,100, a month. Get a couple in there, someone who is who wouldn't mind living in this neighborhood. Maybe I could have gotten that. I don't know what the rental rates were at the time. I didn't even look into it because I kind of denied this deal from her. I'm supposed to be the one presenting creative deals to sellers, and she presented this to me, and I denied it because I just wanted to get $5K. I wanted to get my cash from it. During this time, I was building cash, And I was like, I just want to build cash, build cash, build cash. I don't want to build wealth because that's what I would have done if I would have purchased this house from her and did her deal. I would have been building wealth, which is, much more valuable than cash. But you do need cash, you do need cash to build wealth as well. But she offered me a great deal here, 1% interest, and she probably wouldn't even known. she probably, she probably didn't even know. She just wanted around the same amount of money that she was getting per month from her renters. She just wanted something around that number. So I missed out on this, but bro, the point of this video is I hardly ever hear anybody doing creative financing. And I know a lot of people who invest into real estate. A lot of people, I know, over 10, 12 people who invest into real estate. And, all these people are making plenty of money. I have never heard any of these people say anything about them doing creative finance. And I have presented it to a lot of sellers and they just get confused about it. They just don't. So when you see people on line and YouTube saying, oh, they're doing these subject tools and they're doing these owner financing deals and how you can get into real estate with no money and you kind of like do these contract for deeds and these things do happen, but my point is they happen seldomly. So you shouldn't stop, because I would never stop presenting owner financing to sellers. But now I know that, because if you look on the internet on YouTube, you hear about this owner financing subject to and all this stuff. You think that it happens so frequently, but it does not. It's like 1 in 100 people that you come in contact with. Out of 100 people, one person will probably know what you're talking about and accept it. They had to be probably really desperate, because most people just want cash. But now I understand that. When these people on YouTube, they kind of do it to get clicks though. But when they talk about subject tools and owner financing and lease options and stuff like that, lease options lease options have been used pretty frequently within my investor circle. People that I know, they do use. They usually use it on the selling side though. Right? Yeah, because with a lease option, it's a technique that you can use when you have a property. So when you buy a property, you can offer a lease option. So you lease the property out. And you give the tenants an option to buy the house. And see, you as, you technically become the seller at that point, because they're buying the property from you once they take you up on that option to buy it. But see, then they start paying a bigger security deposit, a bigger down payment. And then they pay more for the monthly payments, the rent, because they're buying it from you now. So that has been used. I've heard of people, some investors, cash and buyers, who have been using that lease options and rent to own. Those techniques do work really well. But like I said, they're on kind of like the selling side. They do that because they want to sell a property, but they still want to get some monthly income. So they like offer these things, and then this always happens. The people never buy the house from them, so they just give the property back. He just takes the property back, and these people who were in there, they move, and then he puts someone else's and then another set of people, a person or a couple or a family rents this house out, and they do a rent to own or a lease option, and they take him up on his option to buy the house if they lease it, and then they pay a higher monthly payment for rent with the idea that they're going to buy the house, and then they end up not buying it. And see, and this person that I know, he just does this over and over again. He's kind of like selling the same house to 4 or 5 different sets of people over and over and over again, and getting higher rents, and that's kind of how you turn a house into a moneymaker, because usually when you do long-term rentals with houses, they don't really, pencil right. When the rent is small, when you do long-term rentals with houses, rent is nothing. But when you do it like that, that's technically creative financing. When you do rent to own and lease options, you can command a higher rent because these people are under the impression that they're going to buy the house someday. So you can command a higher rent and a higher down payment as well. So I know people who have used those techniques, but as far as owner finance to go, I guess that's kind of like yeah, as far as owner financing go and subject to is when you is basically a wraparound mortgage when you're paying people their equity and then you taking over their loan. So you're taking over their loan and you're paying them on their equity. You paying them their equity, and then you take over their loan. So you assume their loan, and then you just pay them whatever, because like right now, if somebody was to do a subject to with me, I owe $100,000 on my house, so they would assume my loan, so their name will be on my loan, or no, actually, I will be still paying on the loan, and they will pay me, and then, then I will pay the loan. I don't really know how it works, but that's the idea. Or if they can assume it, they'll assume it. But the wraparound is that's what a wraparound is. Wraparound is when you're still paying on your loan, and then whatever buyer comes along and does a wraparound mortgage with you, they will pay you, and then you'll pay your loan. So everything stays in place. But I think with if someone can assume your loan and take over your loan, then your name won't be attached to it. So you're free to leave, at that point. But doing deals where the sellers are still paying their loan and then you're paying them, and all that stuff like that gets kind of complicated and kind of turns sellers off. But that's all I wanted to talk about today. I just wanted to say that these creative finance deals, man, like people get excited about them, but I have rarely seen them work out. I've presented creative financing deals to people in the past, and it's just too complicated. So I don't see how these people are doing it. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, or maybe I haven't spoken to enough sellers, or what. Maybe it's the part of the country I'm in. I don't know. But I have spoken to plenty sellers and presented creative financing deals to them, and they're like, I don't know. It just sounds so complicated. Why you just can't give me the money? Because it make you. I'm not going to lie though. It makes you come off as someone who doesn't have the financing to buy the house. Because why are you talking about me? If I'm the seller, and if someone comes up to me and tries to present a creative finance deal, I'm thinking the same thing. Like I'm like I think that these sellers think. They're like, why you just can't give them my cash? You probably do not have the cash. That's why you're trying to do this old tricky, complicated deal, because you don't have the cash. And then they kind of like the confidence on whether or not you will close or follow through, it wanes. So it's something to think about. But so I don't want to talk to you about today. I'll talk to you another day.